This one is a downward dog-ish like transition to a forearm handspring-ish balance on the pole, okay? In other words, it's gonna be half a arm balance, half a handspring-ish, okay? If that arm was on the pole, I guess it would be a full handspring. So whatever you wanna call it. If you wanna call it an arm balance, if you wanna call it a floor handspring, whichever, okay? So for this one, we are gonna be balancing on a forearm on one side. If you are on a hard floor, I would strongly encourage you to get something squishy to put underneath that arm, whether it's a yoga mat, a towel, something just to give you a little push for that elbow. I find if I'm just passing through this move, once or twice in the middle of a combo, it doesn't bother me too much, but with repetition over and over, and you're still figuring out a move, or if I'm demoing it and teaching it and doing it a bunch of times, after a while, it takes a little wear and tear on those bony elbows, okay? If you're on carpet, not as much of an issue. Okay, so you might want something squishy. It can be an entire yoga mat, something little. Really, you just need something for that part of the elbow. I would discourage you, though, from doing this on a complete pole crash mat, only because they tend to be overly squishy and it's going to actually make it harder to balance. Okay, so better to just have something small like a yoga mat versus to have a big cushy thing. Because, like I said, the more cush you have, the more movement you're going to find when you try to find your balance on this one. Okay, so for this, the arm that is farthest away from the pole is going to end up dropping down to the forearm. So if you do have one shoulder that is easier for you to push out of, you might want to have that be the arm that's farther away. When you go to this forearm balance, this is a common misconception or oversight, or sometimes we're just not thinking about it because we have so many other things to think about. When people tend to go to a forearm, they forget that they still need to push out of their shoulder. Okay, so whether you're in a straight arm handstand or a forearm, you still want to always make sure that you're pushing down with that shoulder, not letting it creep up to your ear. Okay, so with this, like I said, when you place that forearm on the ground, make sure you push up and out. Okay, so I'm going to start from my knees. You can start from standing and just drop down into this. Personal preference, whichever you prefer. How far apart to put your hands and feet? Roughly a foot, a third of a meter-ish, okay? But that's, of course, going to vary depending on the length of your limbs, overall height, and your comfort level, okay? Some people might find that they prefer being a little bit closer to the pole for balance. Some people might prefer a little bit farther away, but think roughly that's going to be your guide, and then you can kind of roughly in and out just to kind of give you an idea. If you are too close to the pole, you're going to find oftentimes that it's going to be harder to find your balance. So as much as we oftentimes feel like we have more security being here, in this particular case, you do want to have some distance. So just make sure you don't get too close, okay? So I'm going to start down on hands and knees. And if I put my knees in line with the pole, that means when I do get up to my feet, they're going to be roughly that distance away from the pole that I said I wanted to be. And I'm really close to the pole. You can even just be like almost with it in front of you. You could be just to the side or almost in front. So I'm going to place my hands to the other side relatively close together. Because keep in mind, it's the outside hand, the hand farthest away, that's going to end up dropping to my forearm. If I put my hands too wide, that forearm is going to end up dropping down really far away from the pole. Okay, so you can either A, sheet your arms over a little bit in front of the pole, or just make sure they're close together and they're not like this. Because like I said, that means that then you end up putting this forearm really far away from the pole. So just be conscientious of that when you're placing it down. Okay, so I'm starting on my knees. My hands are going to place on the floor close to the pole and close to each other. I'm going to pop up and go into a downward dog, okay? Depending on your hamstring flexibility, shoulder flexibility, this is going to be different for everyone. I like the look of my knees being straight. If that's not an option for you, depending on flexibility or things like that, it doesn't make or break this trick, okay? It might be you like the look of the bent knees. Maybe that works with your style, okay? So yes, try to push the hips up as high as you can by straightening the knees, but if hamstring flexibility keeps a little micro bend in them, just think of it as a goal, something to work towards, okay? My outside leg, the leg farther away from the pole, I'm going to bend my leg and bring my heel to my butt, okay? In doing that, it's going to be easier to thread this foot to the pole, okay? Quite often, if we bring our leg up straight, much harder to bring it up to a higher angle, versus if we bend, really think heel to butt like you're trying to kick yourself in the butt, then you can lean forward, so you can kind of lose that downward dog for a moment to hook your foot. You can even flex your foot right here and use that to guide it up. Okay, quite often we don't have that split on our own, but if we can use the pole as a guide, we can get a lot farther than we would ordinarily be able to go. Okay, and once again, if flexibility wise you need to move arms and legs a little bit farther apart to make this happen, 100% make it happen. Okay, So, and I would say more likely to move the legs farther away than the hands farther away, because the legs are going to end up coming off the ground eventually anyway. Okay, but the hands you want to be relatively close to the pole. Okay, so my outside foot is going to go heel to butt. If need be, you can shift forward to make it easier to bring that foot to the pole. You can open your hips too, okay? So if I stay square, much harder to thread this foot versus if I open my hips away so it's unsquare, I can get my foot to the pole even more easily, okay? So I'm gonna hook that foot on the pole, pointed or flexed, thread it up the pole, okay? You can pause here for dramatic effect if you want to. And then from here, my outside arm, my forearm is going to drop. And remember, we're still pushing out of that shoulder. You can rest your butt against the pole there for a moment, and then my inside hand is going to go into a cup grip. I'm going to push with this foot on the pole so I can start to bring that other leg up. And you can pause here. You can even put your legs on the pole to find your balance, okay? And then from here, maybe take one leg off at a time. And if that feels okay, take the other leg off. To come down, you can bring it down to the side. Okay, so it's kind of a pole assisted step up into an arm balance. Okay, and like I said, depending on your flexibility, maybe you don't hit a split going into it. It's still a cool entrance. Okay, so if you have a split, great. Maybe you have a split and you don't want that look, but regardless of whether you have a split or not, still using the foot to help you get your hips up and over can be kind of a nice entrance into this move. Okay, so let's real quick with those things in mind. We're pushing out of that inside or outside shoulder. The inside hand, I'm going to a cup grip, which means my thumb is down and it's right next to my fingers. You can do this to a true grip or a twisted grip if you prefer. This transition, a cup grip actually seems to work really nicely because our butt is kind of resting against the pole just a little bit there, and you can just cup right there, okay? But personal preference, if you really feel strongly and want to switch it to another grip, go right ahead, okay? Bottom shoulder stays exactly the same, okay? So we are hands and knees, close to the pole, hands close together and close to the pole. Pop it up to that downward dog. Outside heel comes to the butt. Open the hips, bringing that foot to the pole, thread it up. Pause for dramatic effect and for the audience's applause. Place that outside forearm down, but make sure you're pushing out of it. Rest your booty on the pole for a second. Cup, pull with that hand as you push with your foot. Legs open and out. Big ol' spready to the gods. Then to take it down, legs to the ground, or if you wanted this to be the beginning of a pole pass, you could always hook your legs and take it up from there as if it was a caterpillar climb. Okay, so funsy little transition to a forearm, cup grip, balance, handspringy, thing. Have some fun with this. I would strongly encourage you to start with this on static pole. If you feel super comfortable with it and want to take it to spin, go right ahead. Just keep in mind the spin pole, when you do go to come up, it is going to have some rotation and it will make that balance a little bit more challenging. But if you're pretty comfortable with arm balances, it probably won't make that much of a difference. But I would say definitely in the beginning, I would strongly encourage you to make sure your pole is on static. Okay, so play around, make it your own, put it together into an entire combo.